The service level that I get right now as a homeowner living in Northwest Fresno in an area that's been built out for a while, that's my baseline of service. I call 911 and I get service. Does the CFD 18 provide any more service than that right now?
So, Scott, you can interrupt me. So, for the areas that are 50-50, their baseline is
People
here.
don't know what that means when they call 911. I'm sorry, city manager. I
Okay.
want to be clear. Right now in the city of Fresno, when I call 911, I have an expectation that someone will answer and I will get service.
Correct.
That's the baseline level of service. When I say enhanced, I'm referring to an extra patrol, for example.
Well, I would equate it not to an extra patrol, but to response times.
So the position of this administration is that you can't guarantee standard response times to people living in a non-50-50 area, which I know no one knows what that means, whether it's considered an infill project or a fringe project.
I would argue the farther we go out on the fringe, the harder it is for us to provide a response
Okay.
time, the longer the response time, because obviously the resources are here, and it just, right, geographically, it takes longer to get to the fringe area.
Okay, I'll leave it at that for now. So let me put it this way. Will the CFD 18 include extra patrols?
The CFD 18 would include extra resources for patrols serving that area than we would have if we are only relying on the general fund regular property tax.
Let me ask it this way. I'm sorry to harp on this because I want to be clear because I feel like we're playing with semantics. I call 911, I get a response time. If a person calls 911, they will get service. Fine, great, we all get that, whether it takes longer or shorter. But are they getting an extra proactive patrol? The county does this, for example. People pay into a public safety tax assessment, but they do have actual extra patrols, like in the Fig Garden Island area, for example. Is it that? That's what I'm trying to understand. When I say enhanced, I'm talking about something above and beyond what we would all agree is that the standard level of service we expect.
Possibly.
Okay.
Part of this, the CFD 18, which I didn't support for the reasons that were stated, this came about because we have a dispute with the county over tax sharing, correct? In that we feel the development is not paying for itself. That's why we want more in terms of the tax sharing. And as a result of not getting more of the tax sharing like we used to on a 50-50 split, the CFD is to make up for that. Is that a fair?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. So in some sense, and I'm raising this with you, City Manager, and it's rhetorical. You don't have to really answer. But in some sense, when we do the CFD, we're acquiescing to the county and saying, we give up. You win. You don't have to negotiate with us because we're going to tax people more rather than getting the appropriate share of a property tax.
Can I answer?
Sure.
I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
But it was our reaction to not, while we're at a standstill with the county, finding a way to let development continue
Yeah.
without further going into the hole financially. So
But-
it was our attempt. I agree. Ideally, we'd have a tax sharing agreement that would be able, to pay for our services. But it was trying to make lemonade out of lemons. I don't disagree with you.
Understand, but once we do this, what's the incentive for the county to come to the table and give us more of the revenue that they should be giving us because we already are taxing people more? There is no incentive. There's no incentive for them to come back to the table because we've acquiesced.
Sort of don't disagree with you, but I would say that prior to us doing the CFD, we were not having productive discussions.
Oh, I understand.
So I mean, we tried for about a year.
Yeah.
And we were sort of holding up development in anticipation. And so, once again, I don't disagree with you,
No.
but we were trying to find a way to allow development to move forward at the request of the industry and not shut things down.
No, it's been clear the county and its elected leaders have been obnoxious with the city of Fresno and have basically told us that they don't care what we think and it's irrelevant and they don't care what happens regarding these developments. That's been very clear. That will change soon. But I will tell you also, what would happen if this CFD continued to go forward and by a miracle, we did enter into an appropriate tax sharing agreement? Would the CFD 18 go away? Because at that point then, we are now getting the appropriate property tax revenue, but we have an additional CFD 18 where people are being charged. And my answer, it's a rhetorical question. My answer is typically not with government. Once they start collecting money, they don't like to end a tax that they've created.
So that would be an option, but what I would say is they'd be getting even a greater enhanced level of service. So
Maybe.
if we had
Perhaps.
sufficient revenue from the general fund that was providing the same baseline level of service, this gets a 5-minute response time, this gets a 5-minute response time, but there's more money, then yeah, theoretically could fund more proactivity, just like the CFDs for landscaping.
But
where
the
you-
reality is that money doesn't, once government starts collecting it, they don't want to give it back. And yes,
Well, you are
government.
the government, you are the government.
Yeah, I know, but yes, and that's why I don't support this. And that's why I know that if this moves forward and the tax sharing by miracle, we had politicians over in the county that really wanted to work with the city, this would not go away. And maybe there would be enhanced services, but the fact is people are still paying a fee that they shouldn't be paying anymore.
This is for city manager. You stated that staff, so the administration, and this is what you used, chose from a policy standpoint to not apply CFD 18 on a project-by-project basis. And you made a good point that some areas in certain council districts may have to be assessed more because they're not necessarily generating the revenues other areas make, and that's a fair point. It's the word policy perspective that concerns me because this council is a policy-making body, and I would have liked to have had that discussion last year when we're talking about this so that we can make that decision. It's a hard discussion, but we should be making that decision. And I'm really neutral on that right now. I don't know what the right answer is, but I want to make sure we keep the policy debate on this dais.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that as staff, we make recommendations to this body as part of every item that we present to you.
Ms. City Manager, is there going to be a map that says this is CFD 18, faster service? This one is not delayed.
It's usually a 10-minute hold time.
What is that?
It's usually a 10-minute hold time for everyone.
But would there be a map so 911 operator goes, oh, this is CFD 18, we're going to actually do it at 10 minutes, everybody else is going to be longer?
It's geography.
I have a question for the city attorney. Is it, and I know there's a memo requested on this, but is it legally defensible for this council to dissolve the CFD 18?
Yes, you can do that. Best way probably is to pass a resolution directing my office to draft a new ordinance.
Well, what I'm going to do and then is I'm going to request your office draft that language.
Understood.
I'll make a motion to continue this to the next following meeting at the same hearing time.
Motion and second on the table. Is there any opposition? Seeing none, this matter is continued to next Thursday's council meeting.